I see they picked a broadcaster to go first. No pressure whatsoever. But actually, you know, I'm not even a news anchor, although I did play one on TV for 17 years. And I say that for two reasons. One, because it's funny, and two, because it's true. It's a role that I played, complete with the candy-colored tight dresses and the fake eyelashes, the whole bit. That's not why I went into the business. I went into television news because I thought I could use my skills to inform the community about what was going on, and then together we could make informed decisions about our world and make it a better place, which sounds great. And I think that's the image that the TV news industry likes to portray to the world, but there are two problems with that. The first, the metric that we use to judge our success in the TV news industry is how many people watch. So how many people watch what we're doing. That is the same metric that's used to judge the success of Wheel of Fortune, Law and Order, and every single Kardashian show. Everyone. And this became really evident to me when I went to a larger market, and it was a metered market, so overnight ratings. Every morning I would come in, and every morning I would know instantly whether or not my newscast the night before had been a success or a failure, if I had won or lost. And it wasn't just that I was competing against other news programs, I was competing against everything. I was competing against reruns of 2.5 Men. And not only was I competing against a mediocre sitcom, we were competing and we were losing. And this leads me to point number 2. Ratings are not bragging rights. Ratings translate into actual dollars. This is how newsrooms and television stations across the country fund what they're doing, how they pay the bills. The higher the ratings, the more you can charge advertisers. And that's why during the Great Recession, when we had to lay off 2/3 of our newsroom, it wasn't because we were doing a bad job serving the community, it's because the advertising dollars had dried up. And in this day and age of a fractured media environment that is more competitive than ever before, it's not just about quality news, it is about good TV. That is controversy, conflict, drama, scandal, sex appeal. And I had to ask myself, am I part of the solution or am I part of the problem? And I realized that I was part of a system that allowed a crackpot politician to spew horrible, hateful things playing to the camera because he knew that we would air it, and we did. And I was part of a system that allowed a madman to become infamous for gunning down a room full of first graders. So what do? Do you stay in the only career you've ever known? You've spent half your life in this business. You're good at it. It comes easily to you. You could stay in it for the rest of your life. Or do you walk away and try to make the world a better place? And that's what I did. And it is terrifying. And I would love to tell you more about that at a future date. Thank you.
From TV to newspaper. In 1980, I graduated from college, and I took a job as the Park Place Hotel night auditor over a similar job opportunity in Grand Rapids. Began my pursuit of the American dream. A couple years later, I applied for officer candidate school in the United States Navy. Long story short, the Navy suggested that I stay a night auditor. A couple years after that, though, I left the hotel business and moved into oil and gas land title. Eventually, the oil boom of the 1980s ended up, and I had an option to either leave the state or stay in Traverse City. I decided to stay in Traverse City, moved into real estate land title, eventually opened my own title agency. I'm in Elk Rapids, and that's where I pursue the American dream. 85 years ago, Robert Frost wrote a poem. The opening line is, "Two roads diverged into a yellow wood." And sadly, I was one traveler, could not take both. I stood and looked as long as I could down into the undergrowth. The last line of that poem is, "Two roads diverged into a wood. I took the one less traveled, and that has made all the difference." If I had 6 minutes, I'd tell you that whole poem. Point is, people often cherry-pick lines from that poem to tell me a story about how they did something extraordinary simply because they took the road less traveled. And I argue that the name of that poem is actually The Road Not Taken. And all of our lives are nothing more than a series of roads not taken, opportunities taken, and roads taken. And I would argue that our successes come just as often from times we did things extraordinary as often as we did them ordinary. There's an essay written by Chuck Swindoll called Attitude. key line is the one thing that we all have, the one chord that we all play is our attitude. I would argue that 10% of what happens to me, life is 10% what happens to me, 90% how I react to it. That poem or that essay crossed my desk at a certain time when life was turning out to be a disappointment. Didn't seem like the American dream was anywhere in my grasp. But I realized at that moment I could control my attitude. Life, good and bad, was going to keep happening. But I could choose to be the positive guy, the giver. And as you go through life, I encourage you, as you consider your roads, your attitudes in the American dream, to always contribute to your community. Be courageous. Be the good citizen. In time, with a good attitude and a number of roads taken and those not taken, I think that I have a better grip on what the American dream is going to be for me. And my big idea is that the American dream is still available with a good roadmap, a good attitude, and maybe 3 more minutes to talk about it. Thanks.
We've regressed in the 4 C's is that fear, stress, and politics have fragmented our views of reality so we can't get on the same page. I found an analogy from photography to be helpful in understanding how this works. Our pages are made up of frames, filters, and focus. I had a picture on the wall of my office of the moon rising over the ocean, and I would show it to people and say, there could be a boat over here, but we don't see it. There could be someone drowning here, but we don't see it because this frame limits our view of that scene, just like our frames limit our view of reality based on our experiences and beliefs. The filter is the emotional component. It's what's in our hearts. It colors our experience. Defensiveness doesn't see love. Fear doesn't see opportunity. Judgment doesn't see potential. Focus is what we pay attention to. At any given moment, it's all that we see. We have evolved in an atmosphere of fear, stress, and tension that shrinks our frames to what keeps us safe, darkens our filters to keep us from being hurt, fixes and scatters our focus so that all we see are threats and problems. We can re-evolve by expanding our frames, clearing our filters, adapting our focus so we understand how others see the world. It requires balance and courage, but it's not all that difficult. Think of fear and tension as water between 2 walls. We respond to the pressure by making the wall stronger. That increases the pressure even more, okay? The solution, take down 1 wall. You do that by applying what I call the 4 components of clear vision. There's no more pressure. Over time, this wall comes down. I have worked with people who have killed other humans, who have molested children. I've listened to their descriptions of experiences that shrunk their frames and closed their hearts, making it possible for them to commit these acts. Yet I've never failed to see a basic goodness that I believe is at the core of every human being. We could re-evolve by having the courage to see clearly with an open heart so that we see the best in people. We can create one big page where each citizen can contribute to building healthy and sustainable communities. Thank you.
So how do you want to change the world? What really upsets you? Is it the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of children fighting in wars around the world right now? Or maybe that so many people lack access to clean water? What if I told you there were a shared solution between these and many other problems in our world right now? I believe there is. 17 years ago, I learned that there were millions of children being exploited in the sex trade. I started a global effort to address child sexual exploitation and trafficking, and I sought out the places that were the most severely affected. I found myself in places like Sri Lanka, in the slums there where child sexploitation was endemic, and undercover in Burma, getting video footage to incriminate sex traffickers, fleeing the Lord's Resistance Army affected area on the back of a motorcycle before they attacked again. I found that in these areas that were war affected, the situations affecting children were most severe. I also discovered that almost all wars today occur in places with extremely young populations. And that so often these conflicts, they go on for decades. Now, as a child psychologist, I know that we address the conflicts that we face as adults using the tools that we gained when we were children. So why wouldn't it be the case in these extremely young populations where violence is modeled as the default response to conflict, that these cycles of violence go on and on? Of course this is the case. Well, I wanted to devote myself to a revolution of peace in these severely violent contexts. I committed myself to leveraging the reality of the youthfulness, the malleability of these contexts as an asset, and equipping the children and youth of these contexts as peace builders, as reconcilers, as pro-social civic participants that transform their communities. Now, many of you may be saying, Michael, that's ridiculous. The job is too big. You can't be done. Let me give you a quick example. Afghanistan. In 2012 alone, with the investment that we made in the military investment there, we could have invested over $30,000 in every single child in that country, a place where over 52% of the population are children. I believe that if we shifted our strategy to engaging young people as peace builders and reconcilers, with a fraction of the cost, we can more effectively and more durably bring about transformation within these war-affected contexts. Now, do you want to know how to do it? Give me another 3 minutes. But I'll give you a hint. Whitney Houston did not get it right. Children are not our future. Children are the now. Thank you.
His name was Aylan Kurdi. That name doesn't probably ring a bell, but you've seen the photograph. A little boy in a red jacket with blue trousers, lying his lifeless body face down on a beach in Turkey. Aylan was the victim of the sea, one of 2,600 people who died last year trying to get from the Syrian civil war to the European Union. Half of those 2,600 people were children. Aylan was a Muslim. Now, he was 3 years old. He probably didn't know what a Muslim was any better than he understood a Christian or a Jew, an Arab or a Kurd, or where he was going, which was Vancouver. He was on his way to Vancouver. There was a home waiting for him there, family members. But he didn't get there. He drowned. And we might have forgotten about him. We might have seen him as just another number, were it not for that photograph. And if you've seen that photograph, you can't forget that photograph. Now, we say, you know, it's too hard for us. We can't take all these refugees. We can't take 10,000 Syrians. Some of them might be terrorists. That's true. And you know, you have a higher chance of being struck by lightning twice in one day than being killed by a terrorist in the United States of America. But never mind. Our supposed future leaders have said, this is too dangerous. We can't take these people. We have to keep them out. And it's up to you. You have the power to say, no, that's not who we are. That we are a nation that accepts people, that cares for people. And in this particular case, we created this problem. Yes, I'm sorry to say. But our decisions in Iraq and Syria led to the chaos that we see in the Syrian civil war right now. So we're not off the hook here. We have to do something. We have to act. And as a community, we can start right here, right now. And that is to say to ourselves, what can I do? What can my church do? What can my congregation do? What can my friends do? What can we do to help these people who are right now, 5 million people with their children, mostly women and children, are outdoors in tents, if they have a tent, in the rain, in the cold, trying to keep their children alive. And we are doing very, very little. We can do more to aid them. We can do more to care about them. We can do more to compel our leaders, present and future, to deal with this issue. But it starts right here at home. We have to say we can accept these people in our communities, and we can care for them, and we can make them part of our lives. Let's do it. Thank you.
Until the age of 50, I wanted to be anybody but me. I wanted to be Barbie. And at 50, I found out I'm more like Raggedy Ann, and that is a whole lot more fun. Now, my grandchildren sing this little song, "What does the fox say?" Have you ever heard it? What does the fox say? And I say, I am the fox, and I have a lot to say. But if it wouldn't be for my hairdresser, I would be standing here as the silver fox. And I wonder then what your perception would be of me, because then I'd be seen as a senior citizen, of somebody who is aging. This is called stereotype threat. I believe there is a wealth, a plethora of potential in the wisdom of our senior population that we are not taking advantage of. I think that people are living longer, and they're healthier, and they have a lot of energy. And certainly they have years of knowledge and wisdom and experience which translates into this wisdom. Well, there's another part of this equation, though. You see, the senior population has this inner stereotype threat. It's like they see themselves as old, and they develop these self-limiting beliefs. I hear more I can'ts than I cans. I have talked with seniors all over the world, and they share with me their ideas and their goals and their dreams, and I encourage them to act on these, to develop these. And I just cringe when I hear the answer, well, not now, I'm too old, I'm too old. At the age of 50, and it took a lot of courage, and I was very scared, I went to school, went to the University of Michigan. At 54, I earned my master's. At 67, I earned a PhD. And before I was 70, I wrote a book appropriately called I Don't Want to Be Anybody But Me. I see myself walking in a gray pride parade with a lot of seniors. You did get that, right? Gray pride parade. And we're all wearing these signs. Just ask me. Just ask me. I am very excited about that. I am Dr. Micki Berg. I have a PhD, I wrote a book, I am a life coach, I am a mother of 6, and I'm a grandmother of 11. I am the fox. I am the 76-year-old foxy lady who is on a mission, and I'm not done yet, but I need 3 more minutes to tell you about it.
I am a current college student at NMC who sees things a bit differently than what most people do. Up until a few months ago, I never attended a public school. I was homeschooled. My mother was my teacher, and she used every opportunity to teach me about life. It was never just a typical 9 to 3 school day. Even though a lot of people would not consider interior decorating, digging post holes, or hearing stories from World War II veterans as opportunities of learning, I was doing these things on a daily basis and hearing things firsthand in addition to reading about them in a textbook. I often hear that I'm an old soul because I can really appreciate the things of the past. I attribute it to all the time I spent with my family, grandparents, neighbors, and friends I met along the way. By learning so many lessons from others, my community has been my classroom. Among these diverse individuals, I have learned to respect others, to be resourceful, to have the courage to stand up for what is right, and how to persevere to the point I am able to win at the game The Legend of Zelda. Another significant contribution which greatly affected my life, came from reading a short story which was entitled Washing the Hands of My Father. In short, the boy in the story is asking for a job. The potential employer asks the boy if he's ever worked for his father, who owns a blacksmith shop. The boy responds no. The employer tells the boy to go home and wash his father's hands that night and report back to him the next morning. That evening, as he's home, as he's washing his father's hands, he notices the scars and bruises and feels the roughness and wrinkles in them. He watches his father wince, and suddenly he realizes the price his father has paid for him over the years. This really made me look at my father differently and appreciate the many things I had taken for granted throughout my life. If we are not attempting to make society a better place, if we are not lifting up others or making a positive change in the lives of other people, then we are not living up to our full potential. Every day we need to ask ourselves, whose hands are we washing? One person can make a difference. I'm ready to face the challenges of being an engaged citizen and of passing along the message hope. Let this not only be the start of my journey, but yours as well. Look left, look right, look around you, and you will see the greatest generation is among us. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a secret that I kept for many years. I carried it around with me, convinced by those that were sworn to take care of me that it was in my best interest to keep this secret. And for many years, that seemed to be the case. And then one day, while I was reading and writing for a book I was working on, I came across some information that made me see my secret in a whole new way. I found out that there are 500,000 children in the United States this year that are going to have the same secret as me. And when those children become adults, they're 7 times more likely to end up being homeless than their peers. They're 4 times more likely to be on government assistance, 5 times more likely to be arrested, and 6 times more likely to be convicted of a crime. And while we're talking about these statistics, that means that out of the 1.6 million prisoners in the United States, 1.2 million of them share this secret with me. Of the inmates on death row, 80% share this secret. So what is the secret? We've all been foster youth. And we owe it to these children who, through no fault of their own, have been brought into a system that seems set up to accept and allow their individual trauma and tragedy to take over their lives and to set them up for continued failures. We need to revolutionize the foster care system because we can no longer accept these statistics and outcomes as merely unfortunate. We need to look at the systems, the programs that are working and begin to implement them both here locally and on a national level. When we examine what the most successful people are offering for their children, we don't have to look very far to see the education that they're receiving. And I would propose that, like the Krosnor School in North Carolina, we implement a boarding school that addresses treating trauma and providing stability and security through both school and housing options. Because at its core, when we focus on healing trauma and preparing students for the lives ahead of them, there is no doubt that we can end the nearly 90% recidivism rate for foster youth and finally take hold of the many social issues that are being fed by the foster care system. Every child is one caring adult away from success. I hope that you will join me in my efforts to bring such a school to Northern Michigan, because when we focus on solutions, we can all move forward into greatness together. Thanks.
This is one of my sons, and his name is Samuel. I want to ask you a question. What does it look like to educate Samuel? Does it look like taking something that's external to him and putting it inside him? Does it look like taking a bunch of subjects and trying to fill his brain and his mind with them? Or does education look like taking something that's already on the inside of him and drawing it out, letting it be seen, letting it be made known? I think the clue in answering that question is to understand what the word education means. And the Latin word for education is educa, and it means to draw out. It means to pour on. Michelangelo was famous for looking at a block of marble, and he would study it, he would walk around it and observe it until he saw the identity of what was on the inside. And then he would carve it away in order to release that which was on the inside. He said, I saw the angel inside the marble, and I carved until it was set free. I believe that Sam is made in God's image. And I believe that inside of him is a deposit of grace, a seed, a sense of germinal business. That's my phrase for it. Something that he was born with that's on the inside of him. And that it's part of his soul, it's part of who he is. And that education, robustly pursued, is about drawing that out and setting it free. I believe that he's God's workmanship, that God has a plan for him and a purpose for him, and that his life is really about walking simply in the plan and purpose for him. And I believe that as his father, I have a role, a responsibility to educate, to help him draw that out, to be like Michelangelo, to observe, to see, to study, to watch what's on the inside, to draw it out and set it free. Imagine what our world would be like if education was viewed and practiced this way. What if the mindset and passion of every educator was to look at a student, look at a person, and to study them and to say, I see the potential, and I'm carving away, and I'm not going to stop until that potential is set free, until it's drawn out, until it's been released. That germinal business, like a seed in the garden, it's watered, it's drawn forth, it's observed for everybody to see. We live in a world that is obsessed with branding, so I'm going to brand this by calling it Humanness 2.0. Humanness 2.0 to me is a new, more robust view and expression of what it means to be human. It's about trying to create a culture in society. Say, Traverse City, what a great place to do something like this. That just cultivates and grows humans. Thomas Jefferson said, the greatest American idea is that all human beings, irrespective of the accident of their birth, are entitled to enjoy the aspirations of being fully complete and free human beings. I dream of a world in which all people live in freedom and the fullness of their potential, and the hope-filled power of education to actually pull this off. That's very much.
About 10 years ago now, in my psychotherapy practice, I was working with a young man whom I'll call Jack. Jack had come to me because his life was frozen in time. He had stopped taking care of his work. He had stopped taking care of his relationships. And Jack's life was frozen in time because a year prior, without any warning or without leaving a note, his best friend had taken his own life. And Jack could not get his mind around the fact that his best friend was gone. Nor could Jack get his mind around the fact that he had failed to protect his friend. You see, Jack grew up in a violent home. In order to survive the violence of that home, he had adopted the role of being a protector. But now he had failed to protect his friend. So in Jack's mind, he felt he had forfeited his right to move forward with his own life. So one day, in order to help Jack heal, I did a simple mind experiment. And I had done this same technique many times before, but on this day, something new was created. And it not only helped Jack begin to heal, it has since helped hundreds of people try to live their lives more powerfully. I'd like to share that technique with you and some of the lessons learned from it. I first had Jack get in touch with the pain and shame he felt at having failed to protect his friend. And to imagine he was hauling that pain and shame up an inner mountain, and Jack got it. He could see the inner mountain, and he could see he was halfway up and he was stuck. He could even see the summit of his inner mountain. He could see one day if he could get his butt moving again and move it through his life, he'd get to that summit, and the prize awaiting him would be the freedom just to be, the freedom to be Jack. But for now, he was stuck. And so normally in the technique at this point, I try to put my brain in there and try to help him strategize how to get to the summit and conquer the mountain. But on this day, I changed the rules. Instead of trying to help Jack conquer the mountain, I took the mountain away. I had Jack imagine as the mountain receded into the earth. So instead of climbing now, Jack was left standing in an inner meadow with an old apple tree and some wildflowers. And in that moment, in Jack's mind's eye, he got it. And that day in that visualization, his mind gave him a small gift. A little voice inside him told me he no longer had to be the protector to earn his freedom to be. He had always had the gift of being. He just needed to accept it. And for whatever reason on that day, Jack got that message, and he began to heal. So the technique I stumbled upon that day, I call the mountain journey, and I've shared hundreds of mountain journeys since, with adolescents dealing with addiction and CEOs wanting to build great companies. And though each story is unique, there seems to be some common universal truths about the mountain journey. Mainly that many of us are climbing our own inner mountain where we feel like we have to do something really special one day in order to earn our true right to be. So I'd like to share some of the lessons of the mountain journey with you now. 1, our minds are built to expand throughout our lifetime. 2, our current culture is built to keep us very small. 3, no amount of doing will ever earn our freedom to be. And finally, 4th, it takes courage to unlock our being, but when we do that, we unlock our true creativity and our deep ability to serve our brothers and sisters. So now let's explore together how to turn these simple mountain lessons into courageous action. Thank you.
In my family, we know an awful lot about early memory loss, Alzheimer's, and dementia. And it goes back at least 3 generations deep. My grandmother died of Alzheimer's. My mother had dementia that left her deeply paranoid and alienated from us as a family. And my father had early memory loss and eventually died of Alzheimer's. And in the summer of 2011, my memory packed its bag and slipped out the back door. I am clinically diagnosed with what's called mild cognitive impairment or early memory loss. And what I want to do is take just a couple moments to explain to you what early memory loss means and why we need to have a re-evolution and a new way of thinking about it. Early memory loss is about a 3 to 5 year period that happens to people in all ages. But this 3 to 5 year period is a time where our memories start to fade. And what happens after that is that we go into Alzheimer's or dementia. Now, how that affects us, I wish I could say that it was very targeted, but it isn't. It's like a buckshot. It hits us on all areas of our life. And what happens then is that we are less functional than our peers. And so I'm part of a group of people who simply do not produce at the same level as other people do. So I'm part of a group of people who we are underproducers. And yet the problem is that we are still in the workforce. When we originally thought about Alzheimer's and dementia, it was considered to be an old person's experience. But what we're learning is that that's just simply not true. It's happening to people at much, much younger ages. And the problem is, and why we need to have a re-evolution around this, is because our medical community is not catching up or staying up with what we're learning about neuroscience. And neither is the language that surrounds this. You see, even though I'm in my 50s and I'm struggling, I am not eligible for long-term disability. I'm not eligible for long-term disability until I fall into the category of Alzheimer's. In this 3 to 5 year or 7 year period, it's a murky time. One clinician could say that I have early onset Alzheimer's, and another clinician would say, no, you're in MCI. So what that means then is that there is no support. Living up here in northern Michigan, as much as I love it, the truth is I'm alone. I don't have a support group. I don't have any resources to help me. And if it wasn't for my husband, who graciously takes care of so many aspects of our life, I would be in much worse shape than what I am. So here's what I'm asking. I'm asking that you stand with me for a re-evolution, that we take back this part of our life, that you help me as we help others make a change in memory loss. Thank you very much.
Where are you from? I'm from New York City, the Bronx. You got a problem with that? But really, what does it mean to be from a place? Is it just a measure of a moment in time? And if so, is that enough for you to gauge who I am in that moment? I'd like to suggest that the concept is a little worn and requires a little reworking. I don't want to tell you where I'm from as much as I'd like to tell you where I am of.
Did you know that our bodies regenerate themselves every 7 to 15 years? Every single cell, whether you like it or not, you get a new body every decade and a half. Now think about that for a second. That's pretty cool. But where does that new you come from? Well, I might blow your mind here, but it comes from the things that you choose to put in it. And as citizens of our own bodies, I would hope it's our job to find the right ingredients for that body along that journey. Because the way it works is the things that we eat and drink and breathe and surround ourselves with, those things actually become you. It's like a bottle of fine Italian wine. It's not just a matter of where we're from. It's about the intention of what we're made of. Now, again, I'm from New York, and I'm proud of it. Go Yankees. But I can tell you, I'm happy that I am no longer of that place. Because we are made of water and air and earth and the things that surround us. And those are the things that we consume each day. So I'd like to beg your indulgence for a moment as I imagine myself to be that bottle of fine Italian wine, just for a moment. When my vintage is opened and the sommeliers of the day hold it up to the light, they will say, this bottle, cellared well, has great legs, but more than anything, its terroir is unmistakable, with hints of maple and apple and cherry and essences of farmers markets and food trucks and fresh peaches and bicycle races. This wine may be from New York, but it is of northern Michigan. So the next time you're in a meeting and someone comes up to you and asks you where you're from, yes, you'll tell them, I'm from here. But maybe, just maybe, you'll say, wait, let me also tell you where I am of. Thank you.
My name is Tom Gilbert. I used to be a district court judge. Today I'm a person in long-term recovery from the disease of addiction. Research tells us that general public doesn't really know what that means. When I say I'm in long-term recovery, they think I'm trying to stop drinking or drugging. But for me, it means that I haven't had a drink or a drug in over 13 years. I actively practice a program of recovery on a daily basis, and by all indicators, my life has improved dramatically. Frankly, it's never been better. Unlike me, 24 million Americans still struggle with active addiction in the U.S. every single day. 1 out of 10 of our fellow citizens over age 12 suffer from addiction to alcohol or other drugs. Closer to home, nearly 1,000 people living in Grand Traverse County, our friends, our neighbors, our family members, still need help to get well. The appalling statistic is that out of the 10 people that want to get help, only 1 actually can. We don't have enough treatment centers, and the stigma, shame, misinformation that keeps us from talking about addiction or finding addiction solutions. Our whole country's in denial about this. In Michigan, the cost of addiction alone is $13.74 billion, that's billion with a B, in lost labor, criminal justice, and yes, the biggie, healthcare. Yet until now, people haven't been talking about it. Thank goodness that's starting to change. One of my pet peeves is the misinformation or the myth that you cannot help someone until they hit rock bottom. Really? What other chronic, non-curable, progressive, potentially fatal disease do we treat that way? Can you imagine this discussion? Sorry about your diagnosis of cancer. When you get to stage 4, or rock bottom, I'll jump in and help with all my might. That's wrong. It's inhumane, and I'll tell you this, it's unacceptable. The question we should be asking is, what's it going to take to get you some help today? And I'm going to tell you, we got to put an end to messages like this.
Mr. Gilbert, this is Vera Uncle. I just wanted to let you know that we found my daughter Sarah dead this morning. We really tried to get everybody on board for an intervention, but it just didn't work out. So I just wanted to let you know. And hopefully I'll talk to you later. Bye.
The good news is there's 23 million people living in long-term recovery in the U.S. as I stand before you today. We can address this epidemic and change this stupid thing overnight. If you're interested in exploring some effective solutions, let's continue this conversation in May. Thank you.
So one of the coolest things about technology to me is it offers us, the common citizen, the opportunity to review decades, if not centuries worth of information and research. This offers us the opportunity to start some communal dialogue and to start questioning some of these outdated civil practices, like water fluoridation. Water fluoridation started in the mid-1900s as a way to deal with a toxic waste product called fluorosilicic acid. It was something that was so toxic it couldn't be released into the air, so they instead found other ways to deal with it. This was being released by aluminum manufacturers, fertilizer manufacturers, a dawning nuclear industry, and somehow it ended up in our water, which is a discussion for a totally different day. But it ended up in our water because it was touted as a way to thwart tooth decay. But this falls short in a couple ways. First off, most westernized nations are seeing a decrease in tooth decay over the last several decades, whether they have fluoride in their water or they don't. The second main way this falls short is that the CDC themselves, as well as numerous experts and researchers in the field, have agreed on one thing. Systemic use of fluoride serves no benefit, none. But it does have effects. At 0.7 parts per million, which is what we have in our water up here in Traverse City, Michigan, it starts to build up in our bodies. It builds up in our bones, leading to things like osteoporosis, low bone density. It builds up in our brains, contributing to things like dementia. It builds up in our endocrine systems, contributing to things like hypothyroidism and autoimmune diseases. And most ironically, it affects our teeth. Have you ever seen somebody with little white specks on their teeth? Well, this is something called dental fluorosis. And dental fluorosis happens when high levels of fluoride actually interfere with enamel production. Let's talk about our kids real quick. It has a tremendous effect on our children, the most effect, in fact. They say that over 50 studies have actually been done comparing high rates of fluoride or high levels of fluoride with children, and they found that it definitely correlates with lower IQs and ADHD. The bottom line is we need to have the courage to continue our health re-evolution and get rid of some of these erroneous practices. After all, there was a time when lead filled the paint on our walls and asbestos lined the pipes in our homes. Let's make water and fluoride one of those things that used to be.
You own the most special places in this country. The places that drop your jaw, that make you weep, that inspire you to create art and to be a better citizen. And yes, I'm talking about the national parks. These are the places that hold our heritage. From Yosemite to Yellowstone, Guam to Gettysburg, New Orleans jazz to New Bedford whaling. These are the places that tell the stories of we the people. Think of Little Bighorn National Battlefield to the Lincoln Memorial. And what a democratic concept, that the most beautiful and inspiring places are not owned by the wealthy or the elites, but they're owned by all citizens. It's been called America's best idea. The National Park Service is turning 100 this year, and the centennial marks an evolution from being a sort of exclusive caretaker of these places to asking you to help define and determine what is of value and to act to save it in these places. If you don't, it is possible that we may lose them. And if you don't think that's possible, just listen to the campaign pledges being made to privatize government and turn federal lands over to local control. Citizens need to have the courage to demonstrate their values. If you value the parks, you need to contribute. You need to volunteer, to visit. You need to advocate. You need to question those, challenge those who would devalue our heritage. Elected officials, quite rightly, will only uphold those things that the community says are important. A goal of the centennial for the National Park Service is to engage the next generation of park supporters, to try to engage people in a new way so that they define what is relevant. They find something relevant in those parks. So ask an American Muslim if something important can be found at Manzanar National Historic Site, where American citizens were interned in camps just because of their ethnicity. These places have value. The Grand Canyon is still dropping jaws. It's still cutting down that Grand Canyon. Now, here in our community, we have Sleeping Bear Dunes, but all parks are yours. So get up, get out there, and find your park. Thanks.
The human brain is hardwired for story. We think, learn, and retain information in images that our brain translates into meaning. Through story, our ancestors learned vicariously the value of mistakes. They created social rules and belief systems, tried to make sense out of life's chaos. In his book, The Storytelling Animal, Jonathan Gottschall calls us Homo fictus, fiction man. And he states that we are creatures of story and that nearly every part of our life is touched by story. Now, neuroscientists have recently discovered a different kind of nerve cell in our brain, and they're called mirror neurons. These neurons wire and fire together whether we are performing an action or watching somebody else. And they wire and fire in a way that the action is mirrored as well as the intent. It's mirror neurons that allows human beings to have empathy or walk a mile in another person's shoes. 23 years ago, when I was teaching my last group of 6th graders, I didn't know about the brain science behind the power of story, but I did know that the majority of my students were struggling with some adversity in their life that made it hard for them to focus on learning. Each day, we created a community circle where any student could tell a story, and the rest of us listened deeply to them. That year, my students learned to appreciate each other's unique experiences, but they also understood that they were not alone in how they thought and how they felt. When we listen to a story, we draw from the memory files of our brain and connect that story to something that we're familiar with. But we also activate the emotion and desire centers of our brains. Neuroscientists know that the human brain is not rational. And so it's not the external experience, but instead how we think and how we feel that determines our response. When we tell a story from the past, only 50% of that story is true. Each time we tell it, we embellish and reconstruct that story to reflect our current perspective. Our brain doesn't know the difference between past, present, and future. If we can tell a story from the past with new awareness, we can transform our lives. Dr. David Walsh says, whoever tells a story defines the culture. 60 years or more ago, we gave up the role of storyteller to mass media. If we are going to transform our future, we have to claim back the role of storyteller. Story transcends cultures, transcends perceived differences, and taps into our universal human truth. Imagine if we gather together as a community and deeply listen to each person's unique story, and then converged the wisdom and the knowledge that we gained, why we could honor our future, we could refocus in the present and create a new collective future for ourselves. Thank you very much.
On October 13th, 1963, my grandpa Rusty, a rancher on the wide open plains of South Dakota, lost a son. At 18 months old, I found my greatest mentor. Growing up, I hung on his every word, hoping for a short story or a small clue, anything that would give me some insight into the man my dad had been. I did not get one. We spent hours and hours together. I didn't ask. He didn't tell. Grandpa taught me how to drive a pickup, taught me how to plow a field, taught me how to ride a horse. See, he was a cowboy, and there were always horses to feed. And this is where he taught me a lesson that I still apply today. Use grass and hay to fill their bellies, he would say. But don't forget just a small handful of the good stuff, some grain. He would explain how just a little bit of corn and oats can grow the heart of a horse and build stronger muscles so it was ready for any workday challenge. The good stuff, don't forget. I got it, Grandpa. Today, I still believe in Grandpa's simple theory that a little bit of the good stuff can make a big difference. I'm convinced you and I can share our own version of the good stuff and solve community problems. This is why I've been involved with Big Brothers and Big Sisters for almost 11 years. I've learned that laws, regulations, public opinion, political rhetoric, that's the grass and the filler that swells our bellies with so many community problems. For me, the best solution is when you and I, as citizens of this community, summon up the courage to make a real contribution towards breaking the cycle of poverty that is at the core of these issues. Judges, that's all 4 keywords, 1 sentence. Think about it. Do you want to grow the heart of a child so he is motivated to put a better roof over his head? Do you want to give a child strength so she goes for that better job? Then join me. Mentor the kids in need in our community. Together, we can give them the good stuff they're craving. It's hope. Hope for a better job. Hope for a better life. You see, hope is the good stuff that grows the heart of a child. I've been that kid. I've gotten through some of life's toughest challenges on just a handful of hope. Grandpa Rusty spent no time telling me about a man in my past. Instead, he taught me life lessons to prepare me for my future. That's why I know that just a little bit of hope in the soul of the child is the good stuff that can break that cycle of poverty and raise the community to a better place.
I believe that being a good citizen is more about showing up than showing off. Yet we live in a culture that is all about showing off. So I was that overweight, insecure girl in your 4th grade class that never wanted to show up. I always loved to hide behind my weight or maybe go on a diet because then all I had to do was show off. I also grew up in a culture of showing off. You might know it. It's called politics. My father was an ambassador and a presidential fundraiser. So it wasn't unheard of for my house to be filled with ambassadors and presidents. And so I grew up in this world that was just, it's like this political dreamland. So you wouldn't be surprised to know that I was groomed for it. I ended up working on a presidential campaign right out of college. And at 23, I found myself working at the White House. Here I was working at the White House in this epicenter of power. Yet I felt completely insecure and like a fraud. I didn't believe that I belonged there. So there was one thing that helped me get through that. It was escaping with addictions. I was addicted to food, to alcohol, to men, and even to marathons. It was the only thing that was getting me through it. Eventually, my body started to react. My body started to give me panic attacks every single day after my 8 a.m. staff meeting. It was time to go. But I didn't know how or why I would do it. So I ended up, not until 2 years later, leaving Washington. And I got to move to the Midwest, where I was finally able to breathe. And when I was able to breathe, I could finally show up for myself. I was finally able to address those addictions that had haunted me for years and look at that pain from my childhood that sent me to them. All because I showed up, I've been able to keep showing up. But it wasn't me that did it. It was people before me that did it too. They showed me by walking their walk how to show up. What's funny is that in this process of learning how to show up, I have found that we live in this show-off world more than ever. To me, I see that we are sending the generation a message that it's all about your highlight reel and nothing about being real. So my question for you today is, when you go back to your Facebook news feed at home, are you going to show off or are you going to show up? Thank you.
I'm Pete Kirkwood, lover of beer and my fellow man. I'm here to give you the courage to be selfish and to tell you how doing so will make you happier, will strengthen your community, and will fulfill your duty as a citizen. So let's define happiness as self-reported contentment or well-being. Let's define selfishness as the pursuit of your own happiness, notwithstanding that of others. And let's assume that everyone, given the choice, would choose to be more happy rather than less. And let's just admit right off the bat that altruism is a way tougher sell than selfishness. So why should anyone listen to me about happiness? Well, studies show that people are monumentally bad at judging for themselves what will and what won't make them happy. Money, for example, will make you happy, but only while you're poor. A new car will make you happy, but only while it's new. Losing a limb will actually bum you out, but for a surprisingly short period of time. So how do we know all this? Well, social scientists in the emerging field of hedonics are generating all kinds of new insights into the real drivers of human happiness. These are the insights that I'm drawing on here. So despite the fact that we'd all prefer to be happier, we spend inordinate portions of our lives pursuing money and possessions, which are demonstrably unreliable means to this end. We struggle for promotions, we skip vacations, we run ourselves ragged. And then we compound our error by carrying around a lot of guilt about a missed dance recital or the size of our carbon footprint. Here's my contribution. I tell you to be selfish. Start pursuing your own self-interest, that is to say your own happiness, with egocentric abandon. But there's one catch. You have to do it directly, and you have to do it using methods that are scientifically proven to work. The research shows that certain practices reliably and durably induce human happiness. And these practices do not include buy another yacht or become a millionaire. But if you do these practices, you will live a happier life than you would have lived if you had bought that yacht or become a millionaire. And by the way, I'm not advocating selfishness because I have anything against altruism or dance recitals. And I'm not some kind of bacchanalian nihilist. What I'm looking for is a reliable, direct, ideology-neutral, and science-based route to maximizing human happiness. But there is a kind of magic in what I'm talking about, and that is this. If you indulge yourself in the happiness generated by these practices, the ones that actually work, you will improve your own contentment, but you will also improve the world and contribute to the happiness of others as an unintended collateral effect of your own selfish pursuit. It's irrelevant whether your motivation is altruism or selfishness. You should do this stuff either way. So, if it's true that people will always gravitate towards more rather than less happiness, as we spread these ideas, they really should go viral. We could spark off a self-perpetuating, happiness-inducing movement that as a side effect improves our communities and the world. So by now you must be dying to know, what are these magical practices that cause waves of happiness to emanate from me out into the world and back again? And of course, like everyone else, there's nothing that would make me happier than to share them with you, but it would take me 3 more minutes. Thank you very much.
Hello, everyone. I'm a boomerang entrepreneur. I left this region 15 years ago in pursuit of my education and in pursuit of, the world, seeing the world. But I always knew I wanted to come back here. And I always wanted to do something that was, going to make an impact on this community. And I did that, and I came back here to start a company called Inhabitat. We focus on designing, building, and growing all different types of living architecture, primarily living roofs. And this is something that I'm very passionate about, and I'm really excited that I've had the chance to do that in my life. Our nation's infrastructure is really critically in danger. In 2013, the American Society of Civil Engineers gave that infrastructure a D+ rating and estimated that $3.6 trillion would need to be spent by the year 2020 to bring it up to today's standards. So what that means is the infrastructure that's out there doesn't meet what would need to be built, what would have to be met to build a building today. And that really scares me, and it should scare all of you. And the one type of infrastructure I'm going to focus on today is stormwater and wastewater infrastructure. That had a D rating, so a little bit less than what the overall was, and they estimated about $300 billion needed to be spent in the same amount of time to bring it up to today's standards. So what do we need to do to help with that? We need to restore the hydrologic cycle of our cities. We need to no longer consider stormwater as a waste. We need to look at it as a resource. We need to look at our cities and look at that water and take it, and make it more beautiful, more livable, and more resilient. We need to adapt the technologies that manage water in more creative and natural ways before it hits those pipes and those underground management facilities that are failing. There's places in New York that are well over 100 years old that are falling apart. We need to replace our handcuffing our developers and do different things to make sure that these outdated technologies are no longer the way of the road. And what that is green infrastructure. This is living infrastructure. This is infrastructure that's going to protect, restore, and mimic the natural hydrologic cycles that are out there in nature. It's something that is widely recognized but rarely optimized. And I'm working on ways to make this happen, and I want to work with cities and municipalities to use this infrastructure to change how we live. And it's slowly happening, dollar for dollar. It's a better use of our money, a better use of infrastructure, and I really think we need to do that. And there's a lot of different strategies out there and a lot of ways to do it, and I feel that I've learned that, and I'm ready to share that with our community, and that's why I came back here. And overall, water is a system and not a substance. And we need to embrace green infrastructure because really it's the wave of the future and it's going to protect the future of our cities. So, thanks a lot.